You're watching VinylicPumaGaming. Hey guys, I'm going to have a Q&A next video. Please be sure to leave a question if you want to participate. Sometimes it can be difficult to figure out where you should put your perk points when you level up in Fallout 4. Now, for the most part, I would say Bethesda balanced most of the perks for Fallout 4 pretty well. That said, there are some fairly bad perks in Fallout 4 that I would actually recommend that most players avoid for their builds. Now, one quick thing before we start this video, some of the picks that I have made here may actually be a little controversial for some people, especially the first 3 or 4 entries on this list. You could argue that some of these are really not that bad. However, from my experience, they usually suffer from some kind of technicality that makes them less useful when compared to other similar perks. With our trigger warning out of the way, these will be the top 12 worst perks in Fallout 4 starting now. Number 12, Iron Fist. When it comes to functionality, Iron Fist is actually not that bad at all. The ability to boost the power of your unarmed attacks or the damage of certain unarmed melee weapons is really nice, and it can be fun to make roleplay builds with this. You also add in the fact that you can occasionally disarm an opponent, you can cripple an opponent's limb, and provided that you've maxed out the skill, you can even paralyze opponents provided you score a critical hit. Now, like I just said, the perk by itself is fine. However, it's crippled by unarmed melee weapons themselves and how Bethesda ultimately decided how to implement them into Fallout 4. As you may or may not know, unarmed melee weapons can only be used outside of power armor. Once you enter power armor, you have to upgrade your power armor arm pieces with bracers to increase your damage. And what I've ultimately found is that you'll usually deal more damage with some of the unarmed melee weapons that you can't use while wearing power armor. The thing is that you need those resistances that power armor provides depending on what your build is. Now, in my opinion, Iron Fist and unarmed weapons in general are pretty gimped in Fallout 4. All of the other weapon types, including standard melee, heavy weapons, pistols, rifles, and even automatic weapons, can be used and are fully compatible with and without power armor. Number 11, Hacker. So this will be another controversial pick for some people. Perhaps to be fair, and as I sort of mentioned with Iron Fist, Hacker isn't god-awful per se, but it's also not especially amazing either. Now, according to the Fallout Wiki, in Fallout 4, terminals appear approximately 70% less than regular locks. More important than that, terminals are mostly used to activate robots rather than to unlock safes to gain or acquire new and perhaps useful loot. So when it comes to unlocking things, you are way better off with the locksmith perk. Personally speaking, I have always hated Fallout 3, New Vegas, and Fallout 4's hacking logic minigame. Picking a lock is so much easier and is a lot more mindless than hacking a terminal. Plus, when you consider most loot in the game is obtained via lockpicking, you're better off just putting the necessary points in locksmith. Now, while some doors have to be hacked in order to open, the vast majority of doors within Fallout 4 can be lockpicked. Plus, if hacking a door is a problem, you can always have Nick Valentine do it for you. Hacker is definitely not the worst perk in the game, but it is pretty redundant if you ask me. Number 10, Night Person. So Night Person is sort of the opposite to the Endurance Tree's solar-powered skill. Instead of increasing your strength, endurance, and healing you during the day, Night Person boosts intelligence and perception by 3 points during 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. And with 2 points in this perk, you also get night vision while sneaking, and if you have Fallout 4's Far Harbor DLC, you can put 3 points in this particular perk to get an extra 30 health points. Now, I will admit that the bonuses received here aren't necessarily bad. After all, the boost to intelligence will improve the rate at which you gain experience, and the boost to perception should help you be a little bit more accurate in VATS. The problem is that this perk only works at night, so really all you're getting is slightly better experience gain at nighttime, which may or may not be worth it to you. Now, if you do have 3 points in Night Person, you also get 30 extra health, but that's also sort of pointless in my opinion. It's also worth mentioning that you need 6 perception to even spec into Night Person. Wouldn't you just rather save the points and put them into Demolition Expert? in my mind, just skip Night Person. Number 9, cannibalism. So if you're role-playing while playing Fallout 4, go ahead and make yourself a cannibal character. Otherwise, I'm going to talk about why cannibalism is bad from a gameplay standpoint. The biggest thing is that most companions really dislike cannibalism. Strong, Codsworth, Gage from Nuka World, and Dogmeat don't seem to mind, but key companions like Nick, Piper, and Preston hate cannibalism. If you care about your companion affinity, you may want to avoid cannibalism for this reason. You will also find that if you like power armor, you can't use the cannibalism perk while wearing it. This means that you will need to get out of your armor each time, approach the corpse, and then eat it, and this can really become an inconvenience if you find you use power armor frequently. It's also worth mentioning that in survival mode, cannibalism causes a status effect called Dark Craving. Dark Craving makes it so that you can't cure hunger with food, and you have to eat people instead. If you do become hungry, you will immediately go from normal to hungry, as opposed to going from normal to peckish like you normally would. Overall, the consequences are more severe, and in order to even cure Dark Craving, you're either going to need some Addictol, or you're going to need to visit a town doctor. If it was me, I would avoid cannibalism unless you're doing a roleplay build. The bonuses aren't really worth it. Number 8, Animal Friend. This perk is fairly redundant, especially when you consider that Fallout 4 also has the Wasteland Whisperer perk available. The only difference between the two that I can find is that Animal Friend will allow you to pacify animals like dogs and rad stags, while Wasteland Whisperer allows you to pacify anything from super mutants to rad scorpions to deathclaws and more. I suppose you should ask yourself whether you want the ability to pacify a deathclaw or a dog. The Animal Friend perk is sort of like the Robotics Expert perk, which in my mind is better and a lot more practical, especially if you're going to be hacking robots or building robots. Robotics Expert allows you to shut down robots every time without fail, and then you can command them to self-destruct, use Frenzy, or whatever else you want them to do. The only reason you might want the Animal Friend perk is to build the Beta Wave Emitter, which allows you to tame creatures and animals at your settlements. Otherwise, just skip this perk. Number 7, Nerd Rage. Nerd Rage is kind of weak for a top tier perk for one of the special stats. Now, it's not absolutely horrible, but it is too risky to use in my opinion. My biggest issue with Nerd Rage is that you need your health to drop below 20% to use what may otherwise be some decent bonuses. This ability allows you to slow down time, plus you get anywhere from 20 to 40 damage resistance, and you also can deal 20% to 40% more damage depending on your perk rank for Nerd Rage. Nerd Rage is somewhat similar to the Martyr legendary armor effect, except you don't get the damage resistance or the increased damage that Nerd Rage offers. In my opinion, you're better off investing in both the Chem Resistant and the Chemist perks. That way you can take as many drugs as you want that replicate the increased damage, improved defenses, and slowed down time effects. Keep in mind that this is all without getting addicted to the chems that you're using and ensuring that you have the highest health value possible. Ultimately, avoid Nerd Rage, save your points for something else. Number 6, Toughness and Refractor. At 5 out of 5, you only get an additional 50 damage resistance for Toughness and 50 energy resistance for Refractor, respectively. What I will say is that depending on your build and armor choice, both of these perks are either mediocre or virtually useless. The other problem with both of these is that there are other perks in the game that provide the same amount of damage resistance that require half the perk points, or at the very least, provide some other somewhat useful bonus. Specifically, there's Moving Target, which we will discuss later, and what that does is it provides both 50 damage and energy resistance while sprinting, and costs 2 points for those specific bonuses. Rooted, on the other hand, provides 50 damage resistance in addition to also boosting your melee damage by up to 50% while standing still. It would be one thing if Toughness and Refractor provided percentage-based bonuses to damage and energy resistance. Instead, they are numerical, and because of that, they are limited. While the requirements to spec into toughness are low, the requirements for refractor are ridiculously high. You need 7 perception to even put points into this perk. If you want my opinion, just use power armor and skip both of these. Number 5, rad resistant. While I think someone could argue the merits of both the toughness and refractor perks to some extent, the rad resistant perk is just useless. Like I've said before, the bonuses to your resistance aren't percentage based, and in the case of rad resistant, you only get up to 40 additional radiation resistance to your overall stats. Here's the thing. If you care about radiation resistance, it's worth mentioning that the HAZMAT suit will provide anywhere from 1,000 to 500 radiation resistance when equipped, depending on its condition. If you use power armor, most power armors provide 1,050 radiation resistance across all of the pieces by default. And if you've got the lead plating paint mod, you can apply 100 rad resistance to each piece, bringing your total resistance to 1,650 radiation resistance. All without the rad resistant perk. And assuming that you know this now, why would you even waste the points on this perk? If you ask me, you're better off getting Armorer to mod more resistances onto your armor. While you will need the resources to do it, you should be able to find them in large enough quantities to make it work. Ultimately, rad resistance sucks. Avoid it like the plague. Number 4, Aqua Boy and Aqua Girl. The bonuses that Aqua Boy and Aqua Girl initially provide are fairly decent. The ability to not take radiation damage when entering a body of water could be pretty useful. That said, I don't really see myself tactically submerging my character in water to gain an advantage. While there is a lot of water in Fallout 4, the only area I see Aqua Boy or Girl being useful would be Libertalia and maybe some of the areas within the Far Harbor DLC. So, give or take, I would say it's really no more than 3 or 4 areas that really allow you to take advantage of this perk. The other problem is that you can't use any of Fallout 4's weapons while you're submerged. Maybe if it was possible to use like 1 or 2 weapons, maybe Aqua Boy and Aqua Girl would be a lot more useful. However, as of right now, it functions more like the rank 5 of the sneak perk where you can crouch and lose enemies that are at a distance, the difference being that you need water and you can't use any weapons. There's also a plethora of ways to cure radiation as well, both from consumables and perks. Really, in my mind, save your perk points for something that's just better, and chem resistant is just an example. Number 3, moving target. At 2 out of 3, you gain 50 damage and energy resistance while sprinting. If you've maxed out moving target, you also get lower action point cost for sprinting. Now, it would be one thing if you had this bonus at all times. Compared to refractor and toughness, you're getting the same resistances at half of the skill point costs, which sounds pretty good. The biggest problem, though, is that you need to be sprinting in order to get this bonus. And while you can melee attack from a sprint, you can't aim and shoot while sprinting, which really limits moving targets' viability. It's clear that the designers over at Bethesda intended this to be a defensive type skill, or maybe they thought it would be useful if your character got overwhelmed and you had to run away. Honestly, the damage resistance provided here is not really enough to make it worth the perk points in my opinion. Ultimately, these aren't percentage-based bonuses, and instead they're just numerical, so they're like a lot worse. I'm ultimately going to recommend that you save your perk or skill points here. Maybe pick this up if you're level 100, but even then, it's still a skip for me. Number 2, Lead Belly. Originally, I would have recommended the Lead Belly perk for survival mode. I regret to admit that in the past I have recommended Lead Belly for survival mode. However, I've had a change of heart, and I highly recommend that you avoid the Lead Belly perk regardless of what difficulty you play. The ability to reduce the amount of rad damage you undergo while drinking infected water is useful. However, there are also a couple of problems with taking the Lead Belly perk for survival. The first is that assuming you're picking up as many empty bottles as you can, you're going to want to fill these with water. While you can usually get dirty water from most water sources, provided you have constructed a water purifier, you can actually put purified water into empty bottles. That way you don't have to use up a multitude of resources. As long as you drink purified water, you're not going to need the lead belly perk. The second issue is that if radiation is a problem, certain perks and modifications can be made to drastically reduce your radiation intake. Solar powered in particular will literally remove radiation outside of combat, and rad scrubbers for power armor helmets allows you to reduce radiation intake from food and other water sources as well. Keep in mind too that even if you drink dirty water with the lead belly perk, you can still get sick. Again, don't waste your time on lead belly, save your perk points. And finally, number 1, V.A.N.S. What is the point of V.A.N.S? You have a map in Fallout 4, and in 99% of cases, you can simply just walk from point A to point B. There are no crazy rock formations or other bizarre locations that you might see in Skyrim. I guess it's worth mentioning that the Nuka World DLC allows you to put additional perk points into V.A.N.S, and at the second rank, you can receive +2 to Perception. At the same time, if you want to even take advantage of this, you need to be level 36. Like I sort of said earlier, it would be one thing if Fallout 4 was more like Skyrim. Skyrim features some mountains and a wider variety of hills, valleys, and other terrain that can be more difficult to navigate. Maybe I would recommend V.A.N.S or quote-unquote clairvoyance at that point, especially if you're trying to get a specific quest that's located in the mountains, but this is Fallout, and the terrain is much more even. Honestly, guys, this should just be a skip. Maybe if you're a really high-level character and you have Nuka World, you might want the extra bonus to Perception, but even then, again, save your perk points. Alright guys, that's going to pretty much wrap up this particular video. If you like this video, please be sure to leave a like. As far as the Q&A is going to go, that's either going to be this Wednesday or this Thursday on the 26th or 27th respectively, so keep an eye out for that. Otherwise, if you like this video, again, leave a like, take care, and I'll see you all next time.